Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Andre and I'm your bookworm, and today we are not reviewing animes, we are going back to book content. However, the book content is still going to be Lord of the Mysteries because today, finally, we are reviewing Volume 2 of Lord of the Mysteries. Alright, for the ones that have never heard of this, even though the channel has been just this content for months at the moment, but Lords of the Mysteries was written by Qian Shui De Wuzei, or the English name Cuttlefish That Loves Diving. This is a Chinese web novel, initially released every week, but I have been reading the full volumes with all the chapters released, and so I have read and reviewed the first volume twice actually, because I read the first volume, or what I thought was the first volume, because it was 100 chapters, but actually the first volume is more than 100 chapters. So then I read the actual first volume, reviewed it here. You can check out on the thumbnails and then come back for this one. And if you're curious, this is a web novel, mostly urban fantasy with steampunk involved. The third volume actually has quite a bit of nautical fantasy as well, so there's a bit of everything in terms of fantasy that you can explore. I know that Goodreads isn't the best platform to report these stats because web novels are not big on Goodreads, but just for consistency, I'm going to put it here. And so on Goodreads, the second volume has a total, or a bit more than 1,500 ratings, which isn't much, but then again, this is not the best platform for it. However, the average score it has is a 4.61 out of 5, which means it's really good. The people that are rating it really enjoy it. And I mean, I don't know how it fares in terms of scores for web novels, but 461 seems to be really good. Now, before we jump into the review of the actual web novel, we have two housekeeping items to do. One of them is to read the synopsis so that you can get a sense of what the volume is about. However, this synopsis is pretty much the same synopsis for volume 1, so there won't be really a change. I'm still going to narrate it to you just so you can get a sense of what it is about. But if you know already, then you can skip to the next timestamp and you'll jump right into the review. Okay? Hope I've given enough time. Let's go. With a rising tide of steam power and machinery, who can come close to being a beyonder? Shrouded in the fog of history and darkness, who or what is the lurking evil that murmurs into our ears? Waking up to be faced with a string of mysteries, Joe Mingrui finds himself reincarnated as Klein Moretti in an alternate Victorian-era world where he sees a world filled with machinery, cannons, dreadnoughts, airships, different machines, as well as potions, divinations, hexes, tarot cards, sealed artifacts. The light continues to shine, the mystery has never gone far. Follow Klein as he finds himself entangled with the churches of the world, both orthodox and unorthodox, while he slowly develops newfound powers thanks to the Beyonder potion. Like the corresponding tarot cards, the Fool, which is numbered 0, a number of unlimited potential, this is the legend of the Fool. Alright, with the synopsis done, the other housekeeping item I have to do is just show you the scores I gave for the first volume, just so that we can have a sense of where I sit in terms of the first volume, what could be improved, what was already great, and then we can jump right into the second volume. But so as you can see, the score I gave was a 4.4, which is pretty good for a first volume, and I mean for my first experience into web novels. At the beginning, I was very unsure about what was happening, but as I got through it, I kept getting better and better. I mean, I was very surprised by the end of how much I enjoyed reading it. I mean, it still had some issues here and there, especially at the very start with the very detailed world, which I've complained enough about it. I know that we have different opinions, me and the fans, but I still abide by that. But I will comment things on the second volume regarding this. But so just so you know, that writing style was probably the thing that was the weakest, world building one of the strongest, 4.4 overall. Now let's jump into the actual review, starting with plot. Okay, where can we start with plot? Because so much has happened in this volume. I mean, in terms of plot, we start off with Klein going into a new city, which feels fresh, it feels new, and especially how we left volume 1. I think the author did a brilliant work at just rebranding everything and make everything feel fresh again. And throughout this volume, we have several small plots that keep popping up that Klein has to solve, and they might seem a bit like side quests that don't really influence the overall arching plot. However, that's where you're wrong, because every single thing that happens eventually comes back and is important for the main arc line. And I mean, the main arc is truly epic in its sense. And the author does this brilliantly, which is raising the stakes without breaking my sense of belief, a disbelief. Because the stakes keep rising, the powers keep increasing in the sense of like there's hundreds, thousands of people in danger with this arch nemesis or these enemies that are trying to have these plots to destroy things, but you can see that the plot is still consistent with the story, especially because Klein keeps increasing in its powers, and so it's normal for him to face stronger enemies that have even bigger goals of destruction. And aside from the fact that we know Klein must survive these because he is the main protagonist, the story cannot go anywhere without him, there are still stakes involved, and there is still a lot of danger that you feel for other characters, and also just to see curiosity to see where the story goes and the plot twists themselves. Like, there are plenty of plot twists that I did not see coming. They were surprising. They weren't necessarily involving Klein in danger, but the twists were there nonetheless, and I enjoyed that. So for this category, I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 5. There are some things that I want to talk about related to plot, but they are also related to other categories, so I'm gonna talk about them there. So yeah, for plot, 5 out of 5. Moving on to characters, I think this is one of the categories that has expanded quite a bit in this volume. In the first volume, we pretty much have the Nighthawks and 2 or 3 people from the gatherings that we would see often. This time around, Klein or Joe or Sherlock Moriarty, whatever you want to call it, he faces a lot more people. He interacts with a lot more characters. And our main protagonist, he interacts with them. It expands not only the city where he is, but also the gatherings. You can see the cast increasing as the story progresses. And another positive thing added to this category is the increase in POVs that we get. In the first volume, we would see Klein majorly, but we would also see Audrey here and there, or Derek as well. But here in this volume, suddenly we have a lot more POVs, which is good because it gives us a context overall of everything that is happening around the world, of different characters, different plots, all of that. Enjoy reading about these plots, then being Audrey's, Derek's, Four's even, who's a character that showed up and became more and more relevant, and I enjoyed how that progression occurred. I'm still keen to know more about Alger and some other people from the gathering, and of course I'm more keen even more to just see other people joining the gathering, but that I think will take some time. But basically this to say that the addition of the characters and us being able to see from their POV makes the story overall more richer, more just deep, because we can see different characters. They all look different and feel different, read different. And because of that, we get this impression of the world being bigger just because we are experiencing different things. And this time around, the characters don't feel as two-dimensional as they felt at the beginning of the first volume. If, for example, with Force, I don't feel like she will do something just to progress the plot in role of Klein. No, she has her own goals, her own fears. She will do things. Of course, some of them will be planned by Klein, some of them won't, but it does feel like she is a genuine person, a genuine character that will do whatever she wants to do. I think this category is very, very close to getting a 5. It's gonna get a 4+ out of 5 for me, simply because Klein as a character still seems a bit too perfect for me. And I know there are plot justifications for him being like that, but it does detract me a bit from the reading because he never fails pretty much. Even when he fails, somehow there's a silver lining and it feels like, oh, he failed in a way that it's actually advantageous for him. But in saying this, the ending of the second volume really started changing my mind about that, and I hope that the third volume changes it completely. Now, world building, this category was the gem of the crown. Before, it had a 5 out of 5, and I'm gonna say right away, it's gonna have a 5 out of 5 as well. Not only do we get to explore the world, but we keep deepening it in several ways. I think Backlund felt like a real city, and the fact that the author also wanted to explore themes like poverty, inequality, and pollution, and Backlund was the perfect setup for that, and it did feel real, it felt authentic. I mean, it didn't feel original in the sense that Backlund is just an industrial city. It doesn't need to be original, but it served the purpose that it needed to serve. And at the same time, we keep getting information of outside of Backlund, information of the world itself, which makes it feel deeper again. It makes it feel big because we get to see characters in other parts exploring. And I mean, in terms of magic systems, again, we just keep exploring and exploring and exploring. We don't necessarily get much added to them, but we get to deepen our knowledge of the information we have already. Get to explore the limits that exist, which is fun and fundamental as well for us to be able to understand how the magic system works. And then we get to see some of the things that were mentioned before, like the cards of blasphemy, which I was very curious to see where they were, and we finally found that out, and it was cool, and I want to see more of them, hopefully in the third volume. But yeah, I think world building is definitely the jewel of the crown for Lord of the Mysteries so far, and like I said, it's a 5 out of 5. And what about writing style, which had been the worst or the least good category of the first volume? And I mean, that opinion of mine was mostly because of the start of the first volume, which had a smorgasbord of information that wasn't exactly relevant for that first volume. However, I would say 70% of that information was relevant in the second volume. However, I still think that it should have been spaced out throughout more chapters so that we would be able to get that relevant information just before it becomes relevant, which in this case would be a lot of this information in the second volume. But aside from that, I think in this volume, the writing has become better, less clunky. And I mean, that might also be due to translation, but it has a pacing with ups and downs just like we want. It feels like the author has finally had the hang of it, the story, and is telling the story that they want to tell. And the other good thing about this volume is that the messages that we get in reading this are not too overt, they're not in your face. You get to think about them, you get to reflect, and of course then you get to, in the book, they are solved, kinda, or at least disasters are avoided because of them. And things like poverty, pollution, inequality, they are all explored in a good way. Now, the only thing I have to criticize in this category is the plot devices. Things like a Zig's whistle, or the poison bottle, or the ruins with the evil entity lives. I mean, all of those things seem very relevant. Each one of them has their own plotline going forward, but it feels like sometimes Klein just completely forgets about it. It's almost like they didn't exist. And that happens until the plot suddenly demands it or needs that item or that location, and suddenly it becomes relevant again in the story. And I don't know if this is just the way web novels are written, if it's very common, but for me, it annoys me a bit because I still remember those items while they haven't shown up for many, many chapters. However, it does feel like they just don't exist for the main character, so a bit more of consistency there would have been better. But anyways, overall for this category is a 4 plus out of 5, which is a good increase for this category. And finally, our last category is enjoyment, and before in the first volume we had gotten a 5 out of 5, so the expectations when I went into this volume were very high. And I think those expectations were met because reading Lord of the Mysteries is always fun. It's always the time where I just grab my Kindle and enjoy reading it. And I mean, even when I was on a reading slump, Lord of the Mysteries was the thing that I could grab easily and just read a couple of chapters and then do something else. Even when I'm sick, which is usually, I don't read much when I get sick, but Lord of the Mysteries was one of the things that I was picking up very easily and just reading a bit, like I said, until I had to put it down again and recover for whatever. So for this category, it's going to be a 5 out of 5. Despite the small technical irks that annoy me or just distract me a bit, I still thoroughly this volume. I think it's very good and it was very fun to read. And so we reached the end of this review. Just as a refresher, we have 5 for plot, 4 plus for characters, 5 for world building, 4 plus for writing style, and 5 for enjoyment, which gives us a final score of 4.6 out of 5. It's an increase from the previous volume, and I mean, if you take those pluses as a few bonus points, you could go to 4.7 or 4.8 even. So that's a good increase going from volume 1 to volume 2, and overall it's very close to a 5 as well. I think this second volume was able to pick up from the first and improve it on the things that needed to be improved, while at the same time keep expanding and keep exploring the other categories that were already good, like the world building and the plot. I'm truly enjoying this adventure, and I'm already on volume 3, chapter 500 something, I think. But I mean, it's still very early for me to talk about volume 3. Just instead, tell me what you think about this volume. Did you enjoy volume 2 over volume 1? Comment down below. And if you're new, don't forget, subscribe, like the content, and you shall be seeing me on Thursdays and Sundays. Next Thursday will be the review of the last episode of Lord of the Mysteries, so tune in for that. And on Sunday, we'll have some book content. So I'll be seeing you soon. See ya.